feels good to ride this bike. I don't think I can get rid of this thing. Welcome back to the channel, you guys. If you are new here, welcome to R1M H2 and recently added to the collection Hellcat based channel, I guess, if you want to say. I just like vehicles and I like making videos about them. If you're an old subscriber, I really appreciate the support, comments, likes, or even just watching the video, honestly. I appreciate all types of support. Today's video is going to be about pretty much how much does it cost to own an R1M. And I'm going to go a little bit more into detail about this, even about like the things that I haven't gotten to yet, if that makes sense. Like things I know I'm going to have to, you know, pay for once it's time, even though I haven't gone there yet. But yeah, I would say there's a very big misconception about like, oh my god, these bikes cost so much money to maintain, which I don't think is necessarily correct. I think any vehicle you have is gonna cost money to maintain, you know what I mean? You gotta not shift into neutral. Alright, so I was saying, any vehicle you have, you're gonna have to get tires for, brakes, spark plugs at some point, you know, the general maintenance stuff that you would do to car, bike, an airplane, whatever it is. Machines need maintenance, and that's a normal thing. It is true that higher performance machines need more maintenance, but also not necessarily. Like for example, if you tune your bike, you're gonna have to replace your spark plugs a little bit more often. I'm not exactly sure how much that would cost on this bike, but I know that's something like every bike needs at some point, especially if they're tuned. If your bike is tuned and all, yeah, you're gonna need spark plugs more often than the usual, and that's a normal thing. For this bike specifically, since it's a liter bike, what I would say that I noticed most on this versus like my old 600, the 636, or just other bikes in general, is tires. Any liter bike, and I mentioned this in the last video I made on the H2 about the review, is that liter bikes chew tires just more because, you know, more power, that, you know, these tires need to do more work for to put down pretty much the power of the bike. You would want sticky tires on high performance bikes like these, and maybe that's another thing, is that usually with like a 636 or other bikes that are not as aggressive. I mean, obviously you can't really fully say that like this bike doesn't, or a 636 wouldn't need as sticky of tires, because it depends on how you ride it, if you're commuting with it or if you're just like canyon carving with your bike. So tires really depends on like how you're using the vehicle, but generally speaking, you would want a stickier tire on a bigger bike, just because, you know, more power, and therefore you want something more stickier. But yeah, so like tires, obviously that's more. Oil changes and all that stuff is really bike dependent. It doesn't matter if you have a liter bike or a 300. I mean, oil changes should be the same for all bikes, honestly, but you know, Harleys and shit versus sport bikes might be a little different, and they might charge a little different. Some places charge a little bit more if it's a European bike, which is a big point in this topic. If you have the new Aprilia 660 or some shit like that, the Super Sport one, that bike is probably going to cost more to do general maintenance for than this R1M. Why? Well, because it's, first of all, Italian. Second of all, it's fairly new. And yeah, parts are just like harder to come by because it's not Japanese. R1M might be considered one of the top bikes, but I'd argue it's like one of the like cheaper bikes to maintain, just because Japanese parts, and most of the parts on the R1M are from the R1. So, you know, that makes it like a lot easier to find parts because R1s are very common and everybody likes them. So yeah, like part wise, it's really bike dependent. So I wouldn't say like this. What the fuck are you doing, man? I wouldn't say this bike costs like more for maintenance or any of that stuff. For me so far, I've literally spent maybe like no, not $500 because I did get tires on it. So a tire, rear tire with install, will run you between like let's just say 200 in case you decided like to cheap out, which I don't recommend on tires because tires are like the life of these bikes. 200 to 300 for tires on this bike with install. Just obviously just the rear. The front will run you another like 200 probably. So 500 for a set, let's just say. And oil change, I got all my fluids, brake, front and rear reservoirs replaced. I know some smaller bikes don't have like a rear brake reservoir. I might be wrong. And they just have like one, but pretty much just like your normal fluid change, which is brake, clutch, oil change, all that might run you like what, maybe, again depending on the bike, like $100 to $200. So well, we're up to about 700, which isn't that bad. Wow, decent amount of people showed up. More bikes here. Nice. I'll check out these bikes. But yeah, fluids, which isn't like a big deal. Tires, brakes, I haven't been needing to replace them so far, and they're chilling. But other than that, nothing really. Like, it's a big misconception that, you know, liter bikes cost a lot to maintain. They don't, even on a high-end bike like this. Unless you crash, then these fairings are expensive as fuck. What else can I talk? Okay, something that's a little bit different, which is also subjective based on the bike, there's fairings. Obviously this is an R1M with pretty much full carbon fiber fairings. So if you would crash this, obviously it's going to be more expensive than crashing your R6 or your R1. Because an R1 at the end of the day is like plastic fairings, you know what I mean? I forgot to mention one last part, valve adjustment. And I wanted to mention how that, like, on most of these vehicles, it is gonna be, sorry, I'm a little distracted by the cop. You gotta always keep an eye out. For most vehicles, it's gonna be like between 14 and 16,000 miles. For the R1s, it's gonna be in the 25,000 miles until that service. But keep in mind, this is a cross-plane engine, so it's gonna cost me a little bit more. And usually that job is in between like $400 to like $1,500. Based on the bike and all that. If it's an inline 4, those are like one of the cheaper options. If you have a cross plane like this, or like a V4 or a V2, where it's not like your traditional inline 4, it's gonna cost more depending on the bike, of course.